In The Shadow of the Conquistador is a book about conquest. It's set in the present time as well as in the 1530s in Peru. In the present day story, there are two boomers, my generation type guys, a good guy and a bad guy, who are taking a momentous trip to Machu Picchu in Peru to come to terms with their lives. And in the old story, we meet two similar good guy and bad guy, Diego de Almagro and Francisco Pizarro, who were the original conquerors of Peru. And the stories intertwine, and we see the parallels between the modern-day conquistadors and the former ones. I'm going to read two sections from the book. One is the old story, and the other is the new story set in the present day. So this is the old story, taken just after the conquest of Peru by Pizarro. He has conquered the kingdom, and he has taken the king Atahualpa prisoner. If you set me free, I will give you a room filled with gold. The promise of the captive Inca king ran through his slumber, and Francisco woke with a start. What was he doing sleeping at such a momentous time? Then he remembered the Inca woman, Atahualpa's sister, who had been in his cot earlier in the afternoon. He had poured wine over her burnished body and lapped every drop, ingesting her heavy musk. He had meant to woo and rouse her that way, but she had remained detached, an ice princess. He would continue his campaign on her later. The conquest of the Inca had to be complete. The wine and the forced lovemaking had put him to sleep. She must have slipped out of the chamber afterwards and was probably licking her hurt with the other Inca women. As he buttoned his tunic and slipped into his black cloak, he regretted what he had to do next. "They are amassing an army and will set upon you. 30,000 Caribs within their ranks will eat you alive. You have to cut off the head, kill Atahualpa." Voices of his lieutenants, including the trusted Almagro, or just the voices in his head. But all was well. Hernando, his brother, was returning from Cusco, the Inca capital, with gold enough to fill several rooms. The elusive gold had finally been discovered, and Atahualpa had paid his dues, despite the rumors about his duplicity. Almagro, Francisco's trusted commander, had arrived from Panama with 200 reinforcements. All was well indeed. Atahualpa was now dispensable. The trial on charges of treason and fratricide went swiftly, for there was no one to speak in the Inca's defense. Torchlight flickered in the square as Francisco stepped out. A tall stake stood in the center. Atahualpa was tied to it, naked, except for a loincloth with faggots piled up around him. Soldiers guarded the perimeter, and a silence had descended that made the sweat break out under Francisco's tunic. Tears glinted in the condemned king's eyes, and they seemed to plead, "Why are you doing this to me, when I gave you everything you asked for?" Francisco averted his gaze from those tearful eyes, grateful for the gloom and the erratic firelight. The Inca's intelligence had surprised him during these months of captivity. Atahualpa had learned chess and cards, and his ability to read and write Spanish had quickly surpassed Francisco's. Friar Vicente stepped forward again, more confident than he had been during a similar meeting months ago in this very place. "Do you renounce idolatry and embrace Christ?" The Inca hung his head. "If you do so, you will be spared burning and die like a Christian." The beaten Inca sighed and nodded imperceptibly. The monk poured water on the prisoner and performed the rite of baptism. "May God have mercy upon your soul, my son." Francisco caught a flicker of gold amidst the crowd. The princess, his ice princess, in her royal costume and gold regalia, flanked by her personal servants, was in attendance. Determined not to hide from the fate of her people, a wave of pride overtook his gloom, and he had conquered the land of gold. All the proof was now before him. He stepped forward and signaled towards the executioner. Now you may use the garrote. And now I will read from the second story, the modern story. The two friends, Jimmy and George, are in Peru on the way to Machu Picchu, and they have just arrived on the Inca Trail. And Jimmy is the narrator. A bus took us to the starting point of our hike the next afternoon, a short test for the longer one to come. After meandering through potato fields for half an hour, we were dropped off at the settlement of Tipon, where we met our guide, Valdez, a short, thick-set man with a pleasant smile that never left his face. He had the burnished skin and flat features of the local Quechua. "Welcome to Peru!" He bowed, securing the red bandana around his neck as if getting ready for some hard work. "Today, we take you on a little climb, just to see how your heart is, okay?" Tipon held the cascading ceremonial pools of the Inca. Water symbolized the cycle of life. A spring inside the mountain flowed into a terrace pool above us, which split into 2 channels, leading to another pool just below, and then into 4 channels, and into a third pool lower down, flowing all the way down into the valley. The water finally drained into the Urubamba River, evaporated, and rained down on the mountain to feed the spring and begin the cycle again, Valdez explained, in glowing terms, how Inca society had been strictly hierarchical, even down to its fasting rituals. No food, spirits, or sex, lasting 1 year for the poor, 1 month for the middle classes, and 1 week for the rich. "I know what you were about to say," I preempted George, who was lost in his absorption of the archaeological site. "Oh, that!" He bestirred himself. "That I know. Nothing much has changed for the rich or the poor. It's life, Jimmy. That's why I gave up politics." "Perhaps you put too much of yourself into it." "Ah, bloody disappointing. Shattered my illusions. Now I look after myself, kill what I can eat, and damn the rest." Leaving Tipon, we traveled northeast to Ollantaytambo, famed for its terraces, and which was our little climb for the day. The giant face of a bearded man on the cliff face opposite was striking. Valdez smiled as he narrated the legend, the commoner Olanta, who abducted the King Pachacutec's daughter, the imprisonment of the lovers in Cusco, their subsequent release and return to Ollantaytambo. Valdez's voice swelled with pride as he recounted the Inca story. It turned more sarcastic when he pointed to the face on the mountain. "Whose face is that, do you think?" "It looks like Moses with his long beard," I volunteered. "It's the face of Tunupa, a messenger of the Inca god Viracocha. When Spaniards came, when Inca see Pizarro's beard and all the white men's beards, they thought they were gods. So the Inca surrender and give up all the gold because they do not want to make the gods angry." "That story is in my book, my version," George said. "I don't think it was so easy for Pizarro, though. He got through on his wits. Nothing is easy in life." We began our climb up the terraces to the mountain facing the one bearing Tunupa's image. I started panting despite many weeks of training on the Stairmaster at the gym. I looked behind me. George had his head down and his breathing was heavy. But he kept pace with us. Fields of corn and potato lay spread around us, and the Urubamba flowed benignly along the valley below. Although the temperature was in the teens, I was starting to sweat. I stripped down to my t-shirt. "How are your hearts, senors?" Valdez, stick in hand, had paused midway and was looking down at us. "By tomorrow, when we start our main journey, you must be fit." I took the last few steps towards him and had to pause until I caught my breath. When I got to the summit, I waited until my breathing evened out before replying, "I've never been so out of shape in my life." George hadn't even made it to the top. Valdez grinned as his hat blew off his head and dangled on its string around its neck. "Many foreigners like you don't realize the magic of the Inca Trail. It is a holy journey, your personal journey. Tomorrow, when we walk, I will not talk, except to show you some interesting sights. Otherwise, you will walk alone, with your thoughts. It is the best way." When we made our way down, George was sitting on an outcrop of rock, his camera hanging from his neck. He looked pale. I was concerned. You think you'll be ready tomorrow? I was looking out at the drop below us and wondered how easy it would be to step off the ledge and end it all, to end the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that flesh is heir to, buddy? This is not the time for Shakespeare. It is time to find out whether you are in condition or not. He removed his cap and placed it on his knee, looking across at the other mountain with the giant face on it. His head was plastered with sweat. Of course I'll be ready tomorrow. I'm no quitter, Jimmy. It was just a thought, that's all. There was a tear trickling down his cheek, and I realized it was more than the altitude accounting for his condition. He rose, dusted himself, and started down with us. Jimmy, Denise treated me like Viracocha, a god. But I behaved like Pizarro. You really haven't forgotten her, have you? Have you? He left the question in the air as we resumed our descent and struggled down the steep steps back to the bus.